Any questions before I jump back into the process here? There were some questions during the break, but I guess those got answered. Okay, then I'm just going to keep rolling. And if at point you want to throw your hand up, why, just do. Oh, there's a hand. Okay. Oh, yeah, you got to have the mic.
I know how to hold a microphone. So you talked about in the scriptures where it says that the way is narrow and many be. And it also goes on to say, and I would love your interpretation of this, that few there be that find it. So in modern Christianity, it's kind of like this exclusivity club. Would you speak to how you understand that from your training and also this perspective?
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay. So there's actually two quotes that go together there. The first one is, so let's do them both. Straight is the way, and narrow is the gate that leads into life. Few there are that go there, and it really just means that if you really get it right, I mean, perfect the process, and hone it down to where this thing we call enlightenment. I mean, and once you get to enlightenment, you're there. I mean, you're done, right? And as you know, I believe that Ken did that. I believe that Bill did that, and I believe that it's possible that there are others that do it, but to get it down to that level of perfection. But the nice thing is that the closer you get, the closer you get. But what I mean by that is the more that drops off and falls away of the identity, the better off that we are, right? The outside, so that you're just aware of the inside, so you're just aware of spirit. And you're following spirit all the time. The ego factor, the temptation factor, isn't even there. If it's there, it's not even acknowledged. It's not. Only in acknowledging it could we give into it, right? So the second quote is, broad is the way, wide is the gate, which leads into destruction. Many there are that go therein, which really just means that very few really get this 100% right. The destruction is it's the fall. It's the nothing which is true. Anything which is not true will collapse. Communism collapsed because it wasn't a true system. All egos eventually collapse, and actually, as we say, the bigger it is, the harder the fall, right? In terms of the kind of the crumbling that will come about. So it's really better that we have a gradual, natural process, which is what the Course is. It's actually 365 lessons, one a day. It takes a while to get through this, and somebody said in the car coming down today, it's just really, you're continually working on this as a perfecting the process until it begins to work you. And then once it begins to work you, that's the alchemical kind of dimension to it, which is fun. Because then there's nothing more fun than feeling as though you're leading a guided life. That you're not only hearing, but you're doing what you are being asked to do. And you want to say thank you very much. Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit more about mysticism. I'm going to start a little bit with the holy instant, and I'm going to talk about some of the characteristics of mysticism, and this will get us to up to 4 o'clock. But a little bit more about the holy instant. So there's a whole chapter in the Course called the Holy Instant, right? I think it's chapter 16 or 15. I take it back. I think they send 15 and 16 both a lot, but one whole chapter is called the Holy Instant. this is one of the best way to think of it is it's a memory, it's an insight, it's an intuition, it's a recollection, or as you know, a word that I prefer, it's a recognition of a state that has always been true. That's all we do. We're just recognizing what has always been the case. God always has been in charge. You know, if you get into trouble, just remember that God really is in charge. And, you know, that means trusting the process, trusting that God really is in charge. And you don't even have to do anything except pay attention. Of course, if you're paying attention, it can be a lot. So, first of all, the holy instant. So, it's a time in which you receive and give perfect communication. So, if it's perfect communication, that means there's no block to the awareness of this presence. Right? One thing to keep in mind about a holy instant, I think I said earlier, it's an instant. It doesn't last. It's as though you're actually sort of stepping outside of time when you have this kind of an experience. The holy instant is the Holy Spirit's most useful learning device for teaching you love's meaning. What that means is that so that actually you want to kind of have a life with a lot of holy instances in them, because it's really also an experience. It's a moment when you are loving purely. You may remember, I won't go over the whole story. I told you a story about a mystical experience that Helen Schuckman had on the subway here in New York City back in 1939. Without going through the story, she shuts her eyes to cut out the horrible scene that she's seeing in front of her. Dirt, crying babies, throwing up babies, people arguing with each other, etc. Has this profound vision that lasts only a minute, but when she opens her eyes, all she's doing is just loving everything that for a moment ago she was disgusting. All right, so just getting us back to that, loving what is, whatever it is. And in Zhao Wang's experience, you may remember that she saw dung and flies after she had her experience, and she loved the dung. And she loved the flies, which would have been something that would have disgusted her before, but then she just saw it as a natural piece of life. One of the early lessons in the workbook of the Course is God is in everything I see, which really means that it's in your sight. It's not that it's in the dung. It's in the sight that sees the dung as being not something that's disgusting, but something that's natural to the whole life process, right? As Thich Nhat Hanh said, first you have to have garbage, you have to have rot and decay before you can have the rose, right? First there's the fertilizer, and then there's the rose. Another way to say it, right?
I have a question.
Okay, David. Yeah, give him, David, the mic. Is it on? Press the button.
Okay. Tell me I'm either right or wrong, but I see an aspect of the holy instant as when you are in the now. Mm-hmm. And maybe there are holy instances like Helen had on the subway, and that the spiritual lady talked about when she was 14 years old. But there are times, and I think we all have this in our own lives, when, for example, I just took a course in painting, and I was so absorbed in what I was doing. I mean, the world could have ended, and I would still be painting away, you know?
I love it,
so, I just think it's somewhat related.
It's definitely related, yeah. Because when you're doing the painting thing, you're engaged in creativity. And there's something about when you're into a really creative moment, when you're giving yourself to just that, you lose track of time. You forget to eat, I mean, whatever it is you do, because you're so absorbed and focused on the moment that it becomes a delightful experience for you. That's actually going to be one of the characteristics we're going to look at here in just a second. So the second quote, the holy instant is the Holy Spirit's most useful learning device. I guess we did that one. But it's a learning device. That's the thing to keep in mind. There are several learning devices the Course talks about. The body's a learning device. It's not who you are, but it's a learning device. It's a tool. Time is a learning device. The Holy Spirit, the holy instant is a learning device. Because what happens is in that moment you see the truth. And what's good about seeing the truth is that you recognize that you can see the truth. And that's a blessedness. That's a blessed experience to be able to get a grasp on it, even if it only lasts for an instant. As I've said before, I think the simplest holy instant mystical experience is just the realization that everything's okay. That as a matter of fact, everything's okay, regardless of what it is that's going on. You're looking at death right now, and that's absolutely okay. Whatever it is, there's no reason for anxiety, right? It's a part of what is in the process. So the holy instant is a miniature of heaven sent to you from heaven. So it's like, again, it's like the clouds part, and for a minute you see into heaven. You get a window, a door. It becomes present in your mind, and we just kind of want to look for these windows and these doors. But the way you facilitate the process of windows and doors is by just being loving yourself.
Like a holy Instagram.
I will repeat that because it didn't get onto a mic. Like a holy Instagram. All right. Very clever, Keith. All right. Very good. Then our last slide. The holy instant is the miniature of eternity. It's a little piece of eternity, right? The holy instant is the result of your determination to be holy. And the determination is a very important part. There's a page 64 in the Manual for Teachers, can God be reached directly? And the answer is yes, with much dedication and commitment, right? But you got to be dedicated and committed for this to be able to happen. It can't be. Well,
I think it's important to look at this holy instant as really an opportunity that the Holy Spirit uses to get us into the present. Because if we remember that the now, or the present moment, is the only aspect in time that has any reality at all. So if time is a teaching device, both the past and the present are both aspects of learning to get us into the present. Because it's in the present that the Holy Spirit can take over to help us see that we need no time at all to actually wake up. We can wake up in a holy instant.
Right.
Yeah.
Very good. Thank you. All right. So this is same. Sometimes that you may have a brief experience of direct union with God. In this world, it's almost impossible to endure. One of the reasons that I put this up there, this is from the Manual for Teachers, that page I was talking about. Zhao Wang's experience when she was here was a little different. Now, what I mean by a little different, it was definitely a holy instant, but in her case, it lasted for several days. Okay? That's another kind of experience. The Course doesn't talk about that. It only talks about holy instances, but in her case, it was what I call an awakening. Okay? She had an awakening experience. And if the awakening experience is, if you will, kind of profound enough, it lasts. It lasts. Not only does it last for a few seconds, let's say, but it has an enduring quality. She said that after 3 days, she had to step out of it because actually the phrase she used, she says, it burns up the body, which, as I said, I think is what happened to Ken, that he got too close to God and burned up the body. It's a little inflammation or initiation. That's combining the word ignite and initiation, right? And she tells me, now we're in dialogue quite a bit, email-wise, that she still has this, that there are days that she can hold this state for hours, actually. So, but it can also be a bother. By a bother, I don't mean that in any negative way. She's got to study and do work, and you can't hang out in that space all the time. You've also got responsibilities, which you don't always want to have. You got to pay bills. You know, you got to do things to pay the bills. But that's why folks go into monasteries, et cetera, also, is to be able to step away from the world, literally, to be able to have a supporting community, which enables you to be able to do that. That's why, for example, in India, as opposed to here, other places, people can sort of step away from the world and get supported by the world, as knowing it's okay that they beg rather than get employed in another way, right? So I have 16 characteristics of a mystical experience, and we got about 45 minutes. Let's see if I can get through these 16 characteristics in that time. I came up with these 16 characteristics just by studying mysticism for the past 40-some years. And you keep beginning to notice things that get repeated, and these are repeated. So first of all, it's an experience of God, right? Another way we could say it's an experience of love, or it's an experience of pure love, right? And certainly if we're experiencing God, there's no fear there. There's no anxiety there. It's what did Albert Einstein say that he wanted to do? He wanted to know the mind of God, right? So that was his search. His search was through physics, but still that was the central. He wasn't a religious man in the external sense of the term. He wasn't an active Jew, but he certainly was in terms of the internal process that was going on. It's a personal soul experience. By that I mean it's not just intellectual, emotional, or sensory, and it often occurs in solitude. I mean, it's not that you can't be with other people. I'll show you some examples of how experiences may happen when we're with others, either just an other or with the group. But on the whole, they tend to occur when we're alone, often like in a nature setting or something like that, where it facilitates the process. Although you can literally, it can just be in your bedroom or looking out a window at a parking lot, or it can be anything, right? It's a definite peak experience. By definite peak experience, I mean you tend to remember it. You don't doubt the veracity of the experience. And it has a quality of kind of fascination about it, because it's kind of an oh wow sort of experience as well. Part of the oh wow is, oh wow, I just had a little liberation from the ego's dominance. It was not taking my peace away from me for a moment. I actually slipped into a very peaceful place and was able to hold it for a while. It's ineffable. That's one of the primary characteristics. Every single researcher in the field of mysticism that I've studied mentions ineffability. There's no one who doesn't mention ineffability. It's really, really difficult to talk about it. Words simply do not work. We might write a poem that might be a little closer to it, but that still isn't quite it, although it does express something of it. Lynn here's a poet. She just gave me a nice poem to include in the next issue of the magazine. So these moments, you kind of get it for a moment, and you see it. And very often when you get a poem, especially at a moment like that, it's you don't feel like you did it, and you want to kind of go, thank you. I don't know where that came from, but thank you for giving me.
Exactly what I do.
Pardon?
It's exactly what I do.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. Thank you for this. It weren't my words exactly, right? Noetic quality, this is important, I think, at another point, not now. I'd like to talk more about the noetic quality. It just means that there's a revelation, illumination, awareness of immortality, freedom from fear of death. From the Course, the knowledge that illuminates not only sets you free, but also shows you clearly that you are free. So again, the Course, there's just one emphasis, basic difference between perception and knowledge. It draws a very, perception is what happens with the body's eyes when we look out upon the world and we make a lot of judgments, analysis, interpretations of the world. Knowledge is something else. It does not involve perception. It's kind of like a pure seeing, if you will. It's not involved with the world. Might very well happen with your eyes closed, for example, or with all the senses kind of shut down when the awareness comes to you. 6, it's simple. It's a very simple experience. One other thing, I'm listening to the Course again as I drive, and I was just noticing a passage where it talks about how simple this Course is. It is just so incredibly simple. But the ego thinks it's very complex and complicated because it involves all this unwinding of the mind, and that looks like a very difficult process. But the truth is, it's just once you accept the process and you be guided through the process, it's very simple. At the same time, profound. It has these two qualities. It completely changes you, for example, right? That's the profound part of it, you know. It moves you deeply. That makes it profound. Transient, we've talked about already. It seems to happen outside of time, or it transcends time, or you lose time. An experience, it may be very, very brief, but it seems like it lasted a long time. Or the reverse may also be true. It may be that it does last a long time, but it seems like it was just a moment has gone by. And that's because you've literally kind of stepped outside of time. You've lost time. David, you may have lost time as you were involved in the art that you were doing. There's no awareness. You're not looking at a clock, right? Repeatedly said that time is a learning device to be abolished when it's no longer useful. So keep in mind, all these learning devices that the Course talks about, they have an end. Okay, so the body has an end. Time has an end. We step outside of time. There's nothing which exists in time which is permanent because what's real is eternity. Right? So even stars in deeper space, which last for billions of years, are destined to burn up. So they too have an end, just as everything does. But so they're impermanent in that sense, right? But it's a quality of permanence.
Even the Holy Spirit has an end.
Okay, yeah. Even insofar as the Holy Spirit is an instrument of our learning as well, right?
We become it.
Right. When you give your mind back to the mind, then there's no longer a separate mind. So in that sense, it's ended, right? There's no duality, there's no dualism, there's no subject-object, which I think is one of the characters that's coming up. Passivity. Passivity means that you cannot direct the experience. You can't manipulate the experience. And if you try to be the director of the experience, or you try to manipulate the experience, you will lose the experience. You lose it the moment. And a good example of that, a little tiny example, is if you ever have a déjà vu experience, which is a little bit like a holy instant, the moment you tell somebody about it, you lose it. Okay? It's like the ego wants to jump in there and brag about it. It's like, oh, I'm having a déjà vu. Well, you're not anymore. If you have one of those kind of experiences, just kind of hang with it. Just kind of hang with it. And then later, you could say, earlier when we were, such and such was going, I had a déjà vu at that time. But don't mention it at the time because you lose it. because you're out of time. But you brought time back into the factor, as a factor into it, right? Practical, not theoretical. It involves action, such as forgiving. It is something the whole self does. It's not just of the intellect or the heart. It's not just an idea. This is something that absorbs your whole being, and in a very practical kind of way, right? We're going to get through these easily. It's not interested in changing, rearranging, improving, or fixing others. Now, the Course is very, very clear about this. It's not our job. It says this many, many times. It's not our job to fix anybody. You know, your job is not to fix. Your job is to love. And the ego wants to get in there and fix it. And fix your husband, fix your kids, fix your boss, fix your employees, and that just gets you in trouble, right? So you leave it alone, and be who you meant for it to be. 11, monistic, or there's only oneness. There's no subject-object. There's no division. It's probably one of the main characteristics of a mystical experience. There's this, and the oceanic goes along with this. The oceanic means there's a sense of a blending or merging or becoming one with whatever the experience is that we're becoming one with. Whether it's, say, listening to a piece of music, you sort of blend in with the music. Of course, the greatest one of the ways that we think of this is when you fall in love. You know, when you fall in love, there's this sense of blending with the beloved. You are one with the beloved. I am the beloved is mine. Remember when I was, I think I've told this before, when I was in high school, and my first experience of falling in love with my high school sweetheart, and it was just head over heels. It was just completely, I thought it would be forever, and then we were connected on this very deep level, and I won't go into why it didn't work, but you know, after about 3 years, it crashed and burned because I was off at college, she was home, and the wolves moved in, and the wolves won. What else can I say? And right after that experience, I read Wuthering Heights, which was a terrible thing to have done. And when Catherine says, "I am Heathcliff," I knew what she meant, you know, because I thought that I was one with this. But there was obviously a lot of illusion around that as well, a lot of needs, so that's what the Course would call a special love relationship. We could talk, I think I would like to talk at some point a lot more about special love relationships, because they're very kind of dangerous places. Keep in mind that 50% of everybody that gets married gets divorced. 65% of everybody who gets married the second time gets divorced. 73% of everybody who gets married a third time gets divorced. And after that, most people give up and just have friends as a much easier kind of a process because of all the illusions that we have. There's a lot, and Brad, not tonight, but another time I'll tell you, but there's a new book out about the Course in Miracles that's very, very revealing, that brings out some parts that got left out, which has a lot to do with especially sex and special relationships like marriage. But that's for another day. That's a rich topic. There's a freedom from sin, guilt, and fear, which there should be. The whole Course could really be thought of in terms of getting free of guilt, because you did something in the past. Guilt is always something that is in the present, and fear is always something that's in the future. By that I mean it's the what if. What if? What if this there's a consequence to this? What if I run out of money? What if I get sick? What if I die? That's a big one, right? And then awfulness. That's the awfulness, full of awe. It was said of the shepherds on the hillsides, I'll speak, this is Christmas time, at when the angels appeared to them that they were filled with awe. Right? Imagine what it'd be like if you saw an angel. What would you say? Awe. I mean, what words would work at that point? Just nothing but awe, right? Wonder, joy, bliss, and enlightenment. Enlightenment is not an experience, it doesn't fit quite into the other categories. It's a result rather than a part of the process, right? And then the realization that love is all there is, truth is all there is, God is all there is, and that's it. Let's see what else we got here. Okay, let's talk. We can do this. This is what produces a mystical experience. So I may have told you, but Sir Alister Hardy was a professor of zoology at Oxford University who became fascinated with studying mystical experiences, in part because he realized it was easy to look backward through the spectrum of life. By that I mean animals and plants and all that kind of evolutionary. Evolution was the process that got him to become interested in, and thought there must be something that extends beyond the human if we keep the process going. It's interesting when we think of something beyond human, we think, for example, of angels. So we put wings on humans, mythologically. It gives it another dimension, right? That's not the way angels are. I think they're not literally, we're not bodies, so light would be a better way to talk about another dimension or another state. So in the 80s, he founded the Center for the Investigation of Nature of Mystical Experiences in 1969. You can go online and look up the Religious Experience Research Institute. In 1980, he put an ad in a paper in London. And he said, I'm studying mystical experiences. If you've ever had a mystical experience, would you write it down and send it in? Now keep in mind, this is pre-PC days, so the best he could do was to keep an ad running in the paper. And he just kept it running. It just continued to run. And over the course of several years, he got literally thousands of descriptions that people wrote in, describing what their experiences were like. And now there's many thousands because it's still running. And there's a couple of different institutions now that collect. You can go online, and if you've had a mystical experience, type up your description of your experience. It'll be added to the database of experiences. So what they began to do is they began to put them in sort of like in piles of what seemed to produce the experience. And we're going to look at what these are. So the major stimulants are, 1, despair and depression. Now, that may seem like a surprising number 1, but it's really not, because more people wake up through crashing and burning than any other way. Eckhart Tolle's experience on a park bench, he's thinking about committing suicide. Byron Katie's laying on a cement floor in a women's shelter and watching a cockroach walk across her leg, and she gets it. What she gets is that she put herself on that cement floor in that women's shelter watching that cockroach walk across her leg, and nobody else put her there. That was the revelation, that she was responsible. If you get that I'm responsible for what I see, I choose the feelings I experience and decide upon the goal I would achieve, and that everything happens to you is your choice. That's a wake up. Wake up, and you woke her up. Neil Donald Walsh has his experience as a result of his house burning down. His wife leaves him, and he's in an automobile accident in which he breaks his neck. Everything is gone. Once everything is gone, what do you got left? Well, you got God, right? Meditation and contemplation are the second major way. I think it's interesting that these two are exactly opposites. By exactly opposite, I mean one is total crashing and burning because the world is overwhelmed, it's chaos, it's just too much, shuts down. The second process is deliberately shutting down. I mean, you sit down, you close your eyes, you meditate, whatever, you shut down the mind to become receptive. There's tremendous similarities between Zen Buddhism and the Course. I have an article on that coming out in a book right after the first year because the goal is the same. I mean, the goal is to shut down the mind so you can become receptive again, right? Natural beauty is number 3. A lot of our mystics are nature mystics. St. Francis of Assisi, a nature mystic. Henry David Thoreau, nature mystic. My original experiences happened on the farm in Missouri. I've said before, I think thank God for Central Park. It keeps the city sane. Can you imagine how crazy this place would be without Central Park? What if it was all like the way it is where it's not Central Park? And the little parks too, in between times. Participation in worship, particularly chanting. But chanting or singing. Helen Schuckman really liked going to the Black Baptist church that she went to with her, that a cook was a Black Baptist cook, and she would take her with her on Sunday mornings to her services, and she really enjoyed that. But part of it because just of all the enthusiasm and the kind of Pentecostal dimensions that were there as well. Maybe something in literature, drama, or film that just really inspires you. You come or walk out of a movie inspired. You're going to be a better person because of it. Maybe not, but illness, particularly illness that becomes overwhelming. A lot of people have near-death experiences. High fevers result in it. They see things. They talk to other people. Etc. Especially the thought that you may be dying, right? Can be a wake-up. Music, again, you're a musician here. Sometime when you're playing, there's so many. On last Friday, do you ever hear of Seymour Bernstein? Anybody? I didn't know him, but listen to him on evening. It was someplace, and he was playing just Moonlight Sonata, and just you get carried away, right? With it. A lot of us can relate to that, I'm sure. Crisis in personal relationship. I underline and bold the ones that appear to be negative experiences. They appear to be negative experiences, but like a crisis in personal relationship, again, take something like a divorce. May actually be revelatory once you get through the process. In the middle of the process, it may not look that way, but once you pass through the process, then you realize that it was a blessing, whatever it was that came to you through that personal crisis. The death of a loved one, particularly grief. That can be a real waker-upper. This really important part of it can take you into the depth of your own being, the feeling. Especially when all of a sudden, you're alone in a certain sense. I mean, if it's a mate, and they're not there, it's we who suffer from when people die. It's not the people who die that suffer. Right, because it's occurred to me that there's a difference between mourning and grieving. The basic difference is that mourning is absolutely natural experience. It's just natural that you have to go through it. Grief, on the other hand, implies that there's some unfinished business. I don't know. You agree with that, Susan?
I do, and it's very complicated.
Oh, wait! I gotta have a mic. She specializes in hospice kind of training. I saw you nodding your head.
Sorry. Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. We're just, the whole grief, bereavement, and death topic is something that we're just not addressing in society right now at all, which is so ironic because we all experience it. And it's very complicated. So I do agree with that. And again, we're not talking about death at all. As a society, it's the second leading fear in this country, which is amazing. And so how, if we can't even talk about it, can we even talk about this place of grief or bereavement or what the skills are to do that? I think for me, I'm a hospice nurse and educator. We say, have your services, and on Monday people are like, okay, you're over it, get back to work. And that's not how this works.
No.
Nor should it be explained like that to people. They deserve their time to have their bereavement and mourning. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. But we got to talk about it first.
Yep.
And talking about that it's okay. It's part of our journey, and this is how we do it, by having things like this. So thank you.
Thank you. It's sad because it's actually blocking the process of going through the. I think I may have told you I once did a funeral, and after the funeral, some weeks later, the widow called me and she said, could you tell me a little bit about what you talked about? My children said it was important. Right? It's like she wasn't there. She was there in body. The body was there, but it was clear. It was clear just looking at her that there was too much Xanax or something. I don't know what it was, but something was keeping her from being able to fully experience. You want to fully experience this. It's when you're going through hell, keep going. That's the story. All right. The only way out is through. All right. What, did I go backwards? I did, didn't I? I play with this thing when I'm not talking. Sacred places. Now keep in mind, nothing is sacred outside of your mind. But we bring sacredness to certain places, and there's certain places that would lend themselves to our being able to move into that more deeply. All right. I've had an experience a few years ago when I was out in New Mexico, and I had to travel from Farmington, New Mexico, which is in the northwest corner, to Santa Fe, which is on the east side of the state. It's a beautiful drive between Santa Fe and Farmington, where you pass all those wonderful homes. I was very early in the morning, and I stopped at Indian Kiva place, and there was nobody there. I was really surprised. There was no one there at all. It was so early in the morning, the gift shop wasn't open, any of that, and sat in the Kiva for a while. And it's hard to explain how. You can imagine all the singing and dancing and things that have gone on there for hundreds of years, right? Visual arts, a lot of ways to relate to that. And the visual arts and the creative work, oops, I'm going the wrong direction here. That's a part of what you were experiencing, David, right? With the creative work, when you get lost in the work, you just lose yourself in the process. The prospect of your own death, the very real prospect of your own death, especially, right? Silence and solitude. Henry David Thoreau once said, "I never met a companion so companionable as solitude." If your mind's in the right place, that's truly true. There's no need to be with other people. It's just your appreciation of the solitude, of the quiet, right? And anesthetic drugs. Think how many near-death experiences usually get reported on operating tables. Right? So people are under the influence of some sort of anesthetic drug at the time, and often when they come out of the experience, they'll have something. My mother, when she was 77 years old, had a serious valve replacement thing in her heart, and she came out of it, and she told us that she had gone off and visited her deceased relatives from the past, that she'd gone into a cave someplace near her childhood home. She was so convinced that it was real that she wanted me to take her there so she could look know, to see what she saw in her mystical experience. Just relaxation, like, did you ever just lay down on the couch on a Sunday afternoon and kind of disappear, kind of drift off into another place? And you're not here, you're not there, but there's something else that's going on for you. Particularly if you have one of those things where you feel like your body is frozen, and you have to wake up. You know, you're not awake, and you're not, but you got to. Childbirth. A lot of women report experiences of childbirth. That's not at all surprising, right? You're literally bringing birth. I mean, you're literally bringing life into the world. Very exciting, very exciting. Psychedelic drugs. I'm actually sort of surprised that that's as low down on the list as it is. But that'll definitely do it. And then sex, or relations. It may be a mystical experience. It may be anything but. I mean, it may be. No, I only mean by that you could feel very alone. I mean, it's like you're not relating, as opposed to being emerging. I mean, blending with. There might be not blending with at all, right? And I think that's about it. Okay, I'm going to stop at this point. We've got about 12 minutes before we're going to, and let's just dialogue about whatever you want to, but I've given you a lot of information, so where would you like to go? Anybody want to share a mystical experience? That'd be kind of fun to do.
A question first?
Oh, yeah, sure.
Okay. I think it's fascinating that you said the difference between grieving and mourning.
Right.
And I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts about how to advance through the grief process.
Well, as I said, the only way out is through. But a part of that if there's some unfinished business, so to speak, then there's the forgiveness process also has to kind of be there. Well, I mean, it's not like a forgiveness of you're going to go ask somebody about forgiveness. It has to happen inside your mind. That part of that would just be recognition that things worked out the best way that they could, the only way that they could. All forgiveness is really just a matter of letting go, you know.
And I guess that would be forgiveness of the self as well.
Yeah, oh, absolutely, forgiveness of yourself. Then, just recognize you did the best you could at the time, and you didn't get it perfectly right. I mean, who gets a relationship perfectly right, right? So we're forgiving ourselves for not being perfect. It's pretty simple in that sense. Yeah. You need a mic. Yeah, actually standing is a really good idea.
So one thing I just want to share with you is the unfinished business is actually accurate, very, very accurate. But here's the wonderful thing about that you don't have to have the person alive in front of you to actually give that forgiveness and have that closure. And many times we don't have that opportunity for multiple reasons. Number one, somebody died too soon. Somebody went into a sleeping coma, which they actually do. And so you think that they can't hear you, what you're saying, so you won't have that opportunity. Or they pass before you're even there. Or you don't want to talk to them at this moment. You don't want to address this, and you can't address this. And you can do the forgiveness at any time in your journey. And the person doesn't have to be there, doesn't have to be alive. And I want you to know that the forgiveness is for you. It's not for the other person.
Always.
Because I've worked with a lot of people who said they don't deserve forgiveness. And that anger is only making their life a living hell.
Sure.
So the forgiveness is for you, not for them. But we have to release. So
Right.
Thank you.
It's eating you up. It's not
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else? If I don't hear anything, we're going to break and have a party.
I just want to mention that.
Yeah, please,
if
please.
If it's not too early, that I'm starting a group.
yes.
Next Wednesday. If anyone is interested, David Fishman will be doing the group for the first session. So if anyone is interested, I can tell you my address now, but if you're interested, 505 LaGuardia Place, apartment 4E, and that's Wednesday at 7:30.
So that's
coming
very near.
Wednesday.
That's very near where we are right now.
Yes,
It's here in
you can walk from
West
here.
Village.
Yeah.
Right.
So that's Wednesday at 7:30 till 9.
If you want to just see Giselle after the class is over, would probably be the best thing to do. Okay. David, take the mic.
In 25 words or less, is the Course in Miracles a learning device to become a
Absolutely.
mystic?
Yeah.
Okay.
Of course, it's a learning device. Yeah, it's a communication device. It's trying to teach us, right? It's showing us the right way to think, the right way to see, the right way to be in this world. And I'm just so incredibly grateful for the Course. I feel just so fortunate to have found it very early on, and I sometimes wonder. I once said to Ken Wapnick, I don't know what I would have done without it. I might have been a Buddhist. But really just because Buddhism is, in my eyes, about as close as you can get to. It's a very different process. The difference between Buddhism and the Course essentially is that Buddhism is about quieting the mind, stopping the mind, so we're not projecting. So you see better, but the main intent of the Course is to heal the mind by healing all of our relationships. And the main process is forgiveness. That's the process of the Course. So we're really letting go of whatever it is that we were holding on to through it's the work, the actual work of the Course. Right? It's simple, but it's very, very hard. Anybody else? Okay. Oh, Lynn, all right.
I have a mystical experience.
Okay, share it.
Like it could have been my imagination, but I don't think so. I was officiating a funeral, and it was my best friend when she was 15, her mother. And well, this was a few years ago. I was 15 too, but her mother died, and at the funeral, I saw her standing there, watching the whole thing, and I didn't know whether she knew it was her funeral or not. She was just standing there. I don't know how I saw her, but I saw her.
Mm-hmm.
And my friend believed me, and it was, to this day, I definitely believe it.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, Dr. Rod Shelberg, who was with us in July, I think it was, who has all these really incredible mystical experiences. He's in charge of 4 nursing homes and a hospice center, and he often reports seeing his patients afterwards. He tells me this one story that the patient just sort of kind of flew by him and waved by. It's like what was interesting about her is that she was an atheist, and so she was kind of fearful about dying. And Rod just has this sort of incredibly calm and gentle presence about him, and he just assured her, no, it's going to be perfectly fine. He says, look, you're just going to go to sleep, hon. And that seemed to relieve her. Oh, there's that particular story. There was her family had brought a tulip next to her bed, right? And when she died, the tulip opened, right? So wonderful how those little kind of things like that, just the sudden going right along with the experience, right?
I don't know. I kind of, my mind is always working, and
just yours.
Yeah, it's. I kind of wonder, when you die. First of all, and the Course says also you don't die without your consent, and then you're a while for. I believe that maybe you give your consent to blend in with the whole afterwards.
That sounds good. I think without our consent, we never know when it's going to be. That's the whole thing that the Course is saying in part there. it could be an accident, or it could be you could live a very long life, and it could be a very natural process. It may not seem to be such a natural process. We just don't know.
I was telling a person that I felt that no one dies without their consent. So she says to me, well, what if I walk outside and get a safe dropped on my head?
Okay.
I says, you might be given a choice to live as a paraplegic or die. You know, it's, I don't know. I believe that.
All right.
I do.
Can I tell you a joke before we stop?
Yes.
So there's a guy walking down the street here in New York City, and he's about to cross the street, and he hears this voice say, "Stop!" And he stops, and just at that second, a car comes whirling around the corner. If he'd have stepped into the street, he would have been knocked over. And your story made me think of it. And he's walking on down further, and then he hears "stop" again, and he stops, and a brick falls right in front of him, and he thinks, my God, he looks up and he says, "Where were you the day I got married?" Okay, let's stop, and let's take up the chairs, and we'll bring some tables out, and we got some food and drink and stuff, and we're gonna put some music on, and